Sorry, pal, I just bought the planet. I want you and all your buddies off by next Friday. Interested to think of an alien race coming in and trying to purchase our planet? And before we try and even wrap our minds around the idea of other types of universal currencies or currencies out there in the universe, we're going to take a look at our own budget and economy here in the United States. Now, if you've had astronomy, space explorations, this is the only repeat activity between the two courses. It's a very important topic in both courses in the world of astronomy. And apologize if you've done this recently in the space explorations class, but maybe you have a little more insight that when you approach what do you think our government spends, maybe you'll approach it a bit differently. And again, apologies if you've done this recently or have done it in space explorations. This focus is not so much on the benefit of space exploration, but more looking into this concept of how much federal money goes to SETI. SETI is an acronym for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. It's actually spelled out for you in a comic on the next page. So the focus of why we're looking on the budget ever so slightly different than what we did with the world of the space explorations. Now, I am going to be splicing into this presentation the outline of what you'll do in this activity and the results of this column from the already made space explorations clip. So you'll see the page numbers will be different as well as what's written down here. But that's okay. We will get back on the same page quite literally as we turn the focus to SETI work. Which of the following would you select in consideration of money to be spent on a space exploration mission, a satellite, a space telescope, whatever it might be? Would you consider paying A, $865 million right off the bat? Would you pay B, just 20 cents a year for a period of 10 years? Or C, neither option. They're both too extreme. We'll revisit that towards the end of our presentation. On page 32 of your notebook, you'll find the United States of America federal budget. Those of you who have graduated from Astronomy, the Universe, this is the only repeat activity between the two courses, and it's essential, vital in both of the courses. So I doubt you have your Universe notebook handy with you. Be shocked and impressed if you do, nor have you probably likely memorized the numbers. So a nice refresher activity for you. So the United States federal budget, we have three columns. We have the what do you think our government spends, what would your government spend, what does the government actually spend. I want you to take some time and seriously consider each of these facets. So first of all, we're going to give you some time to think about what do you think our government spends on these different categories? Now, I've certainly not listed all the categories. The stack of papers you would need to print out for all the different departments, agencies, administrations would just be incredibly thick. So I've taken some of the major highlights from a budget. Education, certainly aware of what education is. Energy and environment. Food and agriculture. Housing and community, so community within the housing, setting aside places for community parks, community areas, centers. Interest on the debt. International affairs, so when you see crises that happen around the world, maybe weather related, and we send aid in the form of money, it's going to come out of this area. When our top secretaries of state or president visit other countries, they generally take and bring them a gift, and that money is going to come out of the international affairs. Medicare and health, these are always topics of conversation and debates in election years. The military, that's going to include Homeland Security post 2001 with September 11th, tragedy there. So military and Homeland Security. Science, This includes medical research within science, so it wouldn't be health in here. This is medical science research, be part of this science. Social Security, unemployment and labor, another hot topic in election years. Transportation, so things like your federal highways, your interstates, maintaining those, building new ones, expanding. And veterans benefits. Benefits paid to military personnel who have given their entire careers and have retired from military service, or rather tragically, someone who, you know, as you go into the military, you are signing your life away. You're writing a blank check for your country. And unfortunately, sometimes you do lose your life, and the military member who passes, their spouse, their immediate family, is given a check. And there's absolutely no amount of money that would replace or take the place of the lost family member. But it's a amount of money so that the surviving family members can continue to live and function for several years. And again, the money is absolutely minuscule in comparison to what someone would be willing to pay to bring their loved one back to them. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 categories. So the dozen here. And I think this comes from 2015. The federal budget was set aside for $3.8 trillion. It's a little easier if you think of $1 and think about, okay, for every tax dollar, how many pennies go towards education? How many pennies go to science? Now you're going to distribute the money between the 12 categories, and you're going to think about how our government spends that money. After you've put some thought into that, you then become the President of the United States, and you get to, should have moved the arrow over here, you get to establish, okay, you're the president, you're the one in charge, you're going to submit your budget proposal to Congress, and you can't just take the $1, or you can call it 100%. You just can't take the $1 and divide it into 12 pieces and write that number down in each of these columns. You have to divvy the money up. Some things are definitely going to require more money than others, and you have to make those decisions, submit your plan to Congress, and defend why you have decided to give one organization, agency, or administration more or less money than another. And you can't put 0 for interest on the debt. You actually are given information from the federal chairman of the reserves of what is the absolute minimum by law that you have to pay on the interest on the debt. So we'll let you decide that for now. You can't pay 0, though. You have to put something here. So your task at hand, fill out what do you think our government is spending in these categories. And then you have the power. What would you propose and submit to Congress and be willing to defend your choices and decisions? After you have put those 2 columns in, we will go over this final column of what does our government spend. So we'll set aside some time for that. There's 12 here, that's 24. You probably won't take a minute per, so cut that time in half of 12 minutes. Let's give you 15 minutes to work through and think through this. Important tip for you, if you're using the 100% or 100 penny method, make sure this column adds up to 100. Make sure this column adds up to 100. So we'll check back with you in 15 minutes. So let's say you've submitted to Congress your proposal. It's unheard of that Congress would initially pass without any adjustment. So to try and simulate the you gotta go back and rework and make tough decisions call, we're going to tell you what you must put for interest on the debt. And then you have the very difficult challenge of trying to say, okay, if you did not put enough here, who are you going to take away from? And with the interest on the debt, our government actually is required to pay just shy of 6 pennies or 6% of the budget. So you need to change this to 5.97, or you can put 6, but one of those two must go in there. If you did something less than 6, you've got the fun decision of trying to figure out who to take money from. If you did more than 6, you can leave this the way it is, or you could legally go ahead and pay less on the debt if you chose to and add it to other departments. So we'll check back with you in about 4 minutes of time for you to make your adjustments. If you don't need to make your adjustments, think about why you made your selection for the highest to receive and which is your lowest, and why you made it the highest priority and the lowest priority out of the 12. You thinking about running for president? All right, so let's actually go through and look at what does our government actually spend here in the United States. This is the federal budget. Imagine that the budget is $1, or how much you're paying on each incoming tax dollar. So we've already mentioned the 5.97. All right, education. The education is just under 3%. You can see why we're often insisting more be put towards education, certainly as an educator myself. Energy and the environment. So renewable energy resources is actually something that is considered in the science budget for ways of reducing fossil fuel consumption, use. This energy and environment is more of kind of maintaining and providing for our national parks, things of that nature in terms of environment on that side of it. Or at least that's where I've grouped it in here in our example. That is going to be just barely over 1 penny on every tax dollar. Food and agriculture. Agriculture's so essential. If you can't grow it, it's got to be mined. And so agriculture, just tremendously important to any civilization. 3.5% or 3.5 pennies of every collected tax dollar. Housing and community, making sure we don't have homeless folks in our country, making sure we have good, safe communities. 1.6 of a penny of 100 pennies. International affairs, offering aid to other countries, keeping friends. 1.31. Medicaid and health. I think you'll see here why so many presidential and even governor elections are so focused on Medicare and health. It's over 27% of our budget. So huge, huge topics of discussion of how things will be adjusted, Medicare and health services in our country. Military, about 16%, so a little less than 16%, 15.88%. Science. NASA is a part of science. We'll take a closer look how much of the science budget NASA receives. And science receives less than a penny, just over 3/4 of a penny. And remember, this is medical research, energy research, and less than a penny. So I guess I shouldn't gripe too much about education. Social Security, unemployment, and labor. Another substantial topic in debates, elections, and that's because it's 33%, 33.25% of our budget. Transportation, keep the highway or the interstates running and making new and keeping that infrastructure. 2 2/22%. And veterans benefits, 4 19/100%. So very interesting in what we have with our government spending. If we were to look at this in a pie graph, this was the 2015 budget that I was using. And so these are the two big areas of conversation in debates. Military isn't so much a debate as it has been in decades and years past. And here's the rest sliced up. So if the U.S. federal budget were broken up through representing a dollar, we know that science gets less than a penny. They get about 3/4 of a penny, 78/100ths of the dollar. The amount that NASA receives is less than a half penny, just less than a half penny. And it's just mind-blowing to me. I mean, my obvious and clear bias towards NASA set aside, just on the pure fact alone that the information and the data, the things that are gained from NASA is open to the public. It's the way the Congressional Act was written in October 1958, or enacted in October 1958. That the patents and things from products developed from NASA would be able to have commercial gains provided. And this is why very early on in the trimester, one of the very first things you do in this class is research these space technology spin-offs. Returning to a SETI focus, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We have absolutely zero monies that come from the federal budget that go towards any type of astronomical research related to trying to explore our universe to see if there's other forms of intelligence out there. Now, before the 1990s, there was a tiny, tiny, tiny fraction of some funds that went to a project, where a tiny portion of funds was used to take the data that had been collected as part of the NASA HRMS project that would see if there was any signs of intelligent life in those radio signals that had been received. A senator was running for election in the early 90s, and he promised the citizens of Nevada that he would go to Washington, D.C. and be on the lookout and stop any frivolous spending. He identified the topic of looking for extraterrestrial life, aliens out in the universe, as rather frivolous, and so he ran on a bit of a campaign platform that he would stop wasteful spending looking for aliens when we had bigger issues at home, such as homelessness, lack of jobs, healthcare issues, which hopefully in looking at that federal budget breakdown today, you saw that we certainly recognize those are tremendous concerns here on Earth and are taken care of quite well within the federal budget. And the tiny fraction of a penny that science receives, and the fraction of that penny fraction that goes to NASA, now no fractions of that fraction of a penny go for SETI research. Anyone who's interested in exploring if there is life out there in the cosmos has to go and get donations from private citizens and private corporations. One of the ways that Senator Bryan was successful, as many politicians are, is the way in which they present the information. So we started this presentation with this question, and the answer of A and B are identical. When we talk or are spoken to in terms of millions or now billions and trillions of dollars, it's just too much for our brain to comprehend. It seems like way too much money. Whereas you talk about 20 cents a year for 10 years from each taxpayer, that doesn't seem like 865 million price tag all at once. That is quite frightening. So we need to be mindful in the way that things are communicated and how we interpret communications. We're going to look more at the concept of the federal budget and monies that are used to try and look for the possibility of life out there in our universe in further presentations.